Welcome to the She's Deeply Rooted podcast. My name is Haydee, and today we're just going to have a conversation and we're just kind of going to flow and see how this goes. But before we get into that conversation, I want to remind you guys that NaviStream.tv is available for all content creators to upload their content. It is a safe place for us to upload our content without the fears of being taken off the internet for not following certain guidelines. So go to NaviStream.tv and upload your content today. All right, let's go ahead and get into this conversation. All right, so I'm not sure what's going on with my algorithm on Instagram, but I ran into a couple videos that kind of triggered a thought about how people are leaving the faith and are deconstructing their faith and leaving to go to other places like atheism or just agnostic or not really sure what to believe in. And a lot of times when we think about people leaving the faith, one of our first responses is, well, they probably just didn't have enough faith. One, two, they just probably didn't have a relationship with God, or God probably wasn't represented the right way, and they probably thought they had a relationship with God, but they really didn't have a relationship with God. So let me just share a little bit of how this conversation kind of sparked, right? I was on Instagram and the algorithm showed me videos of, I'm not sure if you guys have ran into this like meme or this like trend going around where it's like this sound basically saying like all of this work, what did it get me type of thing. And so the POV is, I ran into this young lady that she was a Christian. She put devoted all her time to Christianity just to turn into witchcraft, like just to follow witchcraft. Then there was this other young lady that was into Christianity, and she said all of this work that she put into Christianity, all this work that she put into praying and worshiping and all that, just to turn atheist, right? And it kind of triggered this. Well, first I went into the comments, right? Because sometimes I like to see other people's perspectives, or and sometimes the perspectives kind of suck because they're not really helpful. But in this case, I ran into comments that were basically telling these young ladies that they most likely just didn't have a relationship with God, and they just were basically living a lie, and yeah, they just didn't know God. And so that was the problem. And I don't think those comments are really helpful because we don't really know their situations. I don't know their life story. I don't know what they've been through. One of the young ladies expressed that she was raised in a church and her father was a pastor. And so I can only imagine, like, being a pastor's daughter, like, how life looks very different from the rest of the congregation. As a pastor's daughter, you get to see things that other people don't get to see. You get to see your parents being called for prayer. You get to see people treating your parents some kind of way because they don't accept correction, or they don't accept the leadership, or so on and so forth, right? So as a PK, you kind of get to see things that other people don't get to see, right? So then the other one was Christian turned witch, right? And it really made me sad because I was like, okay, so how did we get here, right? Like um how do we get to a place where we don't believe in God? And it kind of, I believe that the Lord brought back my story where I said that I didn't believe in God, but I was angry at God. So it's kind of interesting to be angry at something that you don't believe in, right? I had a teacher in high school that taught ancient history and like different things that I was very much interested in. And uh, it felt sometimes, like I was telling my husband this, it felt sometimes like he was teaching history so that he could prove that God isn't real. And I know that may sound kind of like, what do you mean? In some ways, when he taught about history, it's like he had a curiosity of wanting to teach history, but at the same time, it was like always this God conversation with a sense of very angry, if that makes sense. And I remember him mentioning one time that if God was real, then he wouldn't have made his son sick. And I remember it kind of triggered a thought. I was like, it's very interesting to be angry at someone that doesn't exist in your eyes, right? You don't believe in God, you don't believe that he's real, so you choose not to believe in him, but yet you're angry at him. So how does that work? Like, how do those two come together? And so I kind of got me thinking into my story about how I, because of the stuff and the trauma that I went through as a child, where, I experienced different things. I experienced sexual abuse. I experienced dysfunctional relationship with my parents, and, you know, uh, me being in church for like a little bit and getting a taste of that, and then coming into seeing my parents turn into completely different human beings, and like my mom seeking after witchcraft, and you know, my dad drinking and doing drugs, and just like just this dysfunctional way of living, right? It kind of caused me to think, well, you guys keep claiming there's a God, but there's just no way that God would allow us to suffer this way, right? There's just no way that God loves us so much. You guys claim that God loves us so much that um he sent his only son to die for us, but why is he allowing us to suffer? And so out of my ignorance, right? Because that's the view that I had. I had a worldly view. I had a worldly view of, well, God definitely doesn't love me because he allowed sexual abuse to happen. God definitely doesn't love me because he allowed my parents to constantly be arguing. And when I came to God, when I had my experience with God, all I knew in that moment was that God loved me. All I knew in that moment, my experience with God, was that God is with me. And so I started to ask questions, because I think the situation is that a lot of these people do not ask God questions. They kind of just make their assumptions, and I'm saying this out of experience because I made these assumptions. Like, we make our assumptions without asking God questions. We make our assumptions without wanting to seek understanding, right? So once I had my experience with God, I was in a place of humility where I was able to humble myself, to learn from God, to glean from God, to understand, like, okay, God, why did I experience all these things? Like, why was my life surrounded by these things? And it all came to one thing, and that is that because we open the doors to sin, a lot of those things that happened to us was because of sin. And because my parents opened doors to sin, and because I didn't know any better and I opened doors to sin. So it's really out of our lack of knowledge of sin. It's our a lack of knowledge of understanding that there is evil still present, right? And so God gave me the understanding of, he did not want me to go through any of those things that I went through. He did not want me to experience any of the evilness that I experienced. But because sin, evil is present, and evil wants to destroy us, and evil wants to kill us, and evil wants to steal our experience with God, it's going to try whatever it can and infiltrate whatever areas it can. So it infiltrated me through these open doors of my parents, walking in perversion, my parents, being married, and walking in adultery, and all these sins that my parents, were in, opened the door for my family and I to be vulnerable to attacks of the enemy. So it opened my eyes to the reality of, wow, God really loves me. And then he took it a step further to show me how he was with me, and he suffered with me during those times. Like, he suffered with me when I was crying alone in my room, and I felt like I didn't understand what my purpose was. I didn't see what I was here for. I couldn't understand what he would want me here for, when I can't even help my mother. I can't even help my father stop arguing. I can't even help them see more in life but besides their dysfunctional relationship. He was with me when I was searching for a way out, when I kept running into alcohol, when I kept running into drugs, when I kept running into relationships. He was with me. He was with me through all of that. He was trying to draw me in all of that, but I was just too blind to see. And it just took the right moment for him to get my attention, for me to see him, but no longer see the evilness around me. The problem is that a lot of us, when we are struggling, when we're doubting and we're struggling with our belief, is that we only see the evilness that is present, and we don't see the goodness of God. And unfortunately, that causes our vision to be skewed when you only see the evilness that is around you and not the goodness of God. I'm going to give you this recent example, and it's a very present one that I'm still trying to process with the whole Israel and Palestine thing, right? Everybody's divided. The evilness and the wickedness of the enemy to divide us is present, right? He wants to conquer us by bringing division into the church, bringing division into the people, bringing war out of this division. He's really trying to cause us to come against each other, right? Because he can't do anything. So um how can he cause harm? By using us, right? So I'm burdened by the fact that there's lives being lost in Palestine, and I'm burdened by the fact that there's lives being lost in Israel. I am burdened by the fact that people are dying in a war, innocent lives are being lost, right? And my husband brought up a point and he said, look, because I was struggling with the concept of Christians, well, we got to stand with Israel, we got to stand with Israel, we got to stand with Israel. I'm like, I can stand with Israel and also acknowledge that what's going on is evil. I can stand with Israel and also acknowledge that lives being lost is evil. So my husband and I were having the conversation, and this is what my husband shared with me. He said, I want you to know that God sees your burden. God sees, like, how you're feeling. He's acknowledging it. And he also wants you to know that he is also still present in that. And he is also present in Palestine. And he is also present in Israel. And he's also present in those places where people don't see him. He is also present. Where people only see evilness, he is present. He's like, there's so many people getting saved right now in Palestine. There's so many people experiencing the power of God. There's so many people that are uh experiencing experiencing Jesus in Palestine, and there's so many testimonies of people saying that they saw a man, they saw Jesus. And so it really brought me a different perspective where it's like, dang, that is like, it opened my eyes to the fact, like, we only see from an evil perspective. Like, when we look at the world, when we see things happening in the world, we only see it from the lens of evil, but we don't understand that God is still present there, and God can still change things there, and God is going to still impact, and God is still going to have his way. And so that's the same thing in our lives. Is when evil was present, when evil things happened to us, God was still present, and God still shifted those things, and God is going to use those things for his good. I didn't have a great relationship with my mother, and by the grace of God, she has accepted Jesus Christ, and our relationship has really grown, and I am forever thankful for that. And at the same time, we did not have a good relationship growing up. And so I feared the thought of me becoming a mother, because I just felt like I was going to be a horrible mother. Like, I just didn't have that relationship with my mom where it gave me confidence to know that I was going to be a good mom, right? And so I just felt like there's just no way that I'm going to be a good mom. There's just no way that I'm going to have the capacity to be able to raise children. And when I had my first daughter, I was lost for words. Like, I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure if I was doing the right things or what. But God took this situation of me being able to have children to give me a new understanding that though I may have not had a great relationship with my mother, he is the one that's going to teach me how to be a mother so that I'm able to steward the children that he has given me properly. So though the enemy had planted seeds of me not, lies, seeds of lies that I would not be a good mother, God is saying, that's not what I said. I did not say that. So you cannot accept the lies of the enemy just because he's giving them to you. Like, we have the choice whether or not we're going to accept the evilness that is around us, right? So it really, this like conversation, let's just, I'm sorry, me watching those videos and running into these videos kind of really gave me compassion for those that are leaving the faith, because I don't know their situations. I don't know why they're angry at God. I don't know why they feel like they never had a relationship with God. I can only speak from my perspective where I left the evilness to come to God, right? And now that I have experienced God, now that I have experienced my father, now that I've returned to my father, I don't want anything else. I don't want to flee from him, because in him I found hope. In him I found love. In him I found peace. In him I found everything that I've been searching for all along. Every time I was trying to run away from home to go do something, I was trying to run to God, but I did not know it. Unbelief is a sin, and anything that is sinful will separate us from our holy, holy God. And I know sometimes people get defensive because um I really believe is a spirit of pride that takes over us, and like really wants us to make things so logical when they really don't have to be. Like, there's just some things that we won't understand right now, but if we just keep pushing, if we just keep seeking after God, then we will gain an understanding eventually. And I think we as people believe that we are better than God, and so we believe that we need to have answers. Like we demand answers from God. And also is like I have compassion for those that grew up in the faith and they were only taught what their parents knew. They didn't understand that they themselves have to seek a relationship with God. I have children and I just pray every single day that they may know him. I pray every single day that they may have an understanding the way that their parents did, of knowing that God is literally the only way. And I even pray for them now that they may commune with God, that they may have know God now, so that they know for a fact that they've been talking to him all along. Whoever's been feeling like they've been struggling with belief, they've been struggling with doubt, and just struggling to believe in God, and so much so that it's caused you to deconstruct your faith to the point of deconstructing God. I think a lot of times there's nothing wrong with deconstructing your faith, because I've gone through that phase where I have had to deconstruct my faith. I have had to ask questions to know that I'm following God, right? Not an institution, not something that has been built by other people, but something that was created by God. I follow him, right? And so there's nothing wrong with asking questions. I think the issue is when you begin to question out of pridefulness. And I think that's where we have to, that's the understanding that people need to gain when people feel like, when people express like, don't question God, is that sometimes the root of your questions is out of pridefulness. And so I really believe that God will answer our questions. How do I know that? Because God has done that for me. Like I'm a curious person, so I'm constantly always asking questions to God, because I want to gain an understanding, because sometimes I just don't get it. I just don't get it, because for me, God is real. For me, God is enough. For me, God is everything. But to some people, God is not. And so I have so many questions, because I'm like, he is our creator. How can he not be enough? Like if he created us, then he has a greater capacity than we could ever have. If he created us, that he know us better than anybody else can. So just coming to that understanding, and so I have questions, when people say certain things or when they walk away from the faith, because I just want to gain an understanding of how did we get here? You know what I mean? And so the other thing is like we make it so okay to walk away from the faith, and it's not. It's actually a really sad thing. If heaven rejoiced when it gains a soul, what do you think happens when they lose one? It should burden us that people are walking away from the faith. It should burden us that people feel this kind of way to walk towards evilness, And I really pray for souls that God continues to. I know God is winning more souls than he's actually losing, but it still burdens me. But I just wanted to kind of break this down, just like my thought process and like what I was thinking about when I saw these two videos, and just thinking about my situation, and just like, I pray that this was helpful and encouraging, and I just pray that whoever's, experiencing doubt, or if you're someone that struggles with your faith and just gaining an understanding of God, is like I tell people all the time, like you need to ask questions. Like you need to, in a way, like by faith, asking questions by faith. Like, okay, God, like I told you guys with my testimony, like I was a, I accepted Christ, but I was still a lesbian. Like I was still struggling, and I asked God, okay, God, you tell me that this is evil. You tell me that this is not the way you want me to live. You tell me it's a sin. Tell me why. Show me why I should walk away from this. And I genuinely, that question was with faith. That question was out of desperate need to gain an understanding. I was desperate for God. And so I asked that question, because I knew that I didn't even know if he was going to answer, but I knew that if he gave me an answer, it was going to be everything that I needed. And he answered. And I think this is the last part that I'll share, is a lot of times we ask questions and expect God to answer in a certain way. And when he doesn't answer our questions or our prayers the way that we expect it to, somehow God is now evil. Somehow God is no longer God. Who gave us that authority to judge God, to make an assumption about God? Who gave us that authority? Absolutely nobody. But that just continues to expose the space that we're in mentally, where we really believe that we are God's and that we can tell God what to do. Like that just shows our heart. It exposes us. And so, I really could go into more detail, but I don't want to make this video so long. And yeah, but I pretty much got the main conversation out. And I just pray that it was encouraging. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And yeah, just let me know what you guys think. Also, make sure you guys follow me on social media on Instagram and all that stuff. I'll put the links in the description below. As you guys see, we're hanging out in my car today because my home is full of babies today. So I was not going to be able to record the podcast at home, but I hope that this wasn't I think this was a good spot. It was a good spot to kind of pour out my thoughts, and I'm looking into nature and it's just a vibe. So, yeah. Make sure you guys check the description box to see all my contact information. You guys can message me or whatever. And I look forward to having guests on here. I don't know who we're gonna have, but we're gonna have some guests. So all that to say is I love you guys. Stay encouraged. Seek after Jesus. Run after Jesus. And remember, it is a narrow path. It is not super wide. So make sure your eyes stay on God. All right, guys. I love you guys. Bye.